This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome you into another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. My name is Chris Graves, and before we get started with that, I want to remind you guys to make sure you subscribe to the podcast, make sure you never miss an episode. If you like what you hear and you like what you've heard in the past, if you could please give us a 5-star rating and review, it's really helpful to help us get better, and it will help us continue to give you guys dope content week in and week out. And week 17 of the NFL season just ended, the last football game of this decade. Seahawks 49ers just ended, and that's about as much as you could ask for a game that determined the 1 seed in the NFC playoffs and was about as important as any game it was today. But yeah, that was a great one. You had two teams that know each other well, that played each other tough the first time and went to overtime. And then the game just was back and forth, and especially in the second half there. And it came down to the end. But how did we get there? Well, first, the 49ers started off kind of hot. They came in firing on all cylinders. They got scores on their first 3 drives of the first half. I mean, the Seattle offense couldn't really do much of anything. And it seemed like the 49ers were just doing whatever they wanted to against them. I mean, they had like I said, they had 2 field goals and then a big Deebo Samuel 30-yard touchdown run on a reverse. And I mean, he's been great for them, especially in the second half of the season, just in terms of the way they utilized him. I mean, he's still, even outside of that run, he had 5 catches for 102 yards. So they use him in all types of ways, and he's been quite the weapon for them, especially, like I said, in the second half of the season. But the second half came around, and the Seahawks, I mean, they're a team that's been battle tested. They have a quarterback who's won a Super Bowl, played into. They have a coach that's won a Super Bowl, been around for a while, and they're not gonna go away easily. And that's exactly what happened in that second half. They fought back, even when it looked like you were kind of a little worried about if the 49ers was just going to run away with this in the second half, and they definitely did not. The Seahawks were able to get a scoring drive on their first drive of the second half, and then from there the scoring was on. I mean, every time Seattle scored, the 49ers answered right back. It was back and forth that entire second half, and it came down to the end of the game. And I mean, there's quite a bit of controversy is going to be talked about it a lot, but they come down there, they're driving after they get their or defense gets their first stop of the second half, really, with Seattle, and they force them to punt. Seattle gets the ball back down 5, 26-21, and they're driving down the field. There's fourth and 10, I believe. Yes, it was 4th and 10 from the San Francisco 12. They get an 11-yard pass down to the 1. They come down, spike the ball, and everyone in the stadium's going crazy. Everyone thinks, oh my Lord, it's Marshawn time. We're going to get it. They're going to win. And then they get a delay of game, which, I mean, is kind of, I don't want to say inexcusable because I don't want to be too hard on Pete Carroll because, like I said, he's been a very successful coach, one of the better coaches in the league. But it's kind of hard to imagine you don't have either Marshawn ready to go in or a play ready to be running that you can't, right at that point in the game, you can't afford a delay of game there. Because, like I said, if they get the ball to 1, you hand the ball off to Marshawn Lynch, who had already scored earlier in the day. I mean, they could possibly take the lead, the crowd erupts, and I mean, now they're playing, now they're getting a home game in the playoffs instead of having to travel. But unfortunately they got the delay game. And then the next pass is incomplete, almost could have been picked off, but it wasn't. The guy wouldn't have got his feet in regardless. And that third down play with potential pass interference, it was kind of crazy because you would think like under 2 minutes is a booth review, so you would have thought somebody would have wanted to take a second look at that. I mean, they did it last week in the Cowboys-Eagles games on that big fourth down stop by the pass breakup by Sidney Jones. They looked at pass interference. I mean, different is change of possession, so it's like you might as well. But in that scenario, you would at least like them to take a look at that. I'm kind of surprised they didn't. And I mean, if Seattle's season does not end the way they wanted to, they would definitely be thinking about that and wondering about that on why they didn't at least get a review. Like I said, they might not have overturned it, but the fact that they didn't even look at it is kind of crazy when you think about it. And then fourth down, I mean, they run a good play. They run a nice route to Hollister. He just gets the 49ers just made a better play. I mean, you stop him, like a half, maybe like a football length away. Like I said, if he just had the ball on his inside arm instead of outside arm, it's a touchdown. And like I said, Seattle's hosting a home playoff game next weekend. But instead, San Francisco survives. Like I said, you got to give them credit. They got the stop when they needed to. And now they're the 1 seed, and that's, like I said, that's huge for them. Just because they're a team, especially with Kyle Shanahan, who's been around, who's been to a Super Bowl, obviously as an offensive coordinator, not as a head coach. But Jimmy G doesn't have too much starting experience in the playoffs. And outside of Richard Sherman, a lot of their guys don't really have too much experience in the playoffs. So just not having to go on the road that first week, even if it's a team as injured as the Eagles, which we will touch on in a couple moments here. But even against them, it's huge getting that first playoff game at home, and then potentially like the NFC runs through San Francisco now, so there's a chance they could have 2 home playoff games for a chance at the Super Bowl. And I mean, that's when you set out at the beginning of the year, that's all the teams could ask for. So, I mean, that game was great. Like I said, just about as good about what you would ask for. If you knew, all right, we're going to get the last game of the season, last game of the decade. It's going to be division opponents. And it's going to come down to the very end. I mean, any football fan would take that. So that was a great game. And like I was touching on earlier, the Philadelphia Eagles, I mean, we've said for weeks, or many people have said for weeks, that no one's wanted to win the NFC East. And I mean, it looked like it for a little while when it seemed like the Eagles and Cowboys were just trading losses back to back. But the Eagles finally showed that, all right, we're gonna handle our business here, and they were able to do it. I mean, even that game was a little bit closer than I imagine Eagles fans and players and coaches at various leagues would have liked. I mean, it's tough when you get in a team that was already came to the game banged up, then you lose Brandon Brooks in that first half. You lose Miles Sanders, who had been arguably your best offensive player over the last 3 or 4 games. Avonte Maddox was in and out of the lineup. Like, a team banged up, lost more players. Like I said, they were in a tight division game. I mean, the Antoine Bethea of the Giants had come out earlier this week said that the Giants were trying to play spoiler, and it looked like that in the first half. I mean, the Eagles were only able to muster up 10 points. And I mean, obviously it was the rain, the weather wasn't great, the conditions weren't great, but they were only able to get 10 points. And you go into halftime for the Giants, it's only 10-3, you get the ball back, and you're like, oh, okay, we might actually could do this. And it looked like they did. I mean, they drove down and scored early in that second half to tie it up. The Eagles were able to rebound. Were able to, after they had to punt, and they got a stop on defense, which, I mean, I'll take a moment to say that again, inclement weather, but the Eagles defense stepped up. I mean, they had been one of the worst defenses on the road this entire season, giving up 29 points, I believe it was, as opposed to only around 17 points at home. And they stepped up when they had to in a big game like this, and they were able to give the offense enough time to bide their time and get things clicking. And then once they did, they were great. But yeah, so after they get a stop, the Eagles are able to drive down the field, get a touchdown. Boston Scott, who was sensational today, I mean, he was great the last time the Giants played. He played the Giants, and I mean, this game is as good of an encore as you could ask for. 3 touchdowns from a guy who was an afterthought on the roster, especially coming into the season because they already had Darren Sproles. But a couple weeks ago, before that first Giants game on Monday night, I mean, very few people knew who he was. Even maybe not that many Eagles fans even knew who he was, and now he's the catalyst to bring you guys to the postseason. So that's great for him. But yeah, but then even coming off that, they scored a touchdown to go up 17-10. One play, 68 yards, Saquon touchdown, and you're just like, oh wow, the Giants when you thought, all right, maybe the Eagles are going to get some momentum, build the lead up. Nope. The Giants come right back down, score in one play. Luckily, the Eagles were able to drive and get a field goal. And then the biggest play of the game, the strip by Malcolm Jenkins after the sack by Derek Barnett on the 1st and 5. I don't want to put too much on Daniel Jones because he has had his fumble issues this year, but I mean the snap was low, so that already started off bad. They didn't pick up the blitz, and then Malcolm Jenkins just comes in, rips the ball out, they recover it. Fletcher Cox recovers it at like the 3 or the 2 yard line, and they punch it in with Boston Scott, and from there, I mean that was basically the end of it. I mean the Giants' offense wasn't able to move the ball much at all. After that, the Eagles tacked on another touchdown just for good measure, just to get the score looking a little better. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. Like I said, the Eagles are a team that was injured coming into this game, was more injured coming out of this game, and it was interesting to see how they hold up in the playoffs, which we'll get to in a little bit. But we'll get to later this week. But the Eagles were able to find a way to get it done when they needed to, and I mean that's a testament to the coach and Doug Peterson, the team, the players. Just they've been playing playoff football for the entire month of December, and I mean that's all you can ask for. You want your team to get hot at the right time, and that's exactly what they're doing. So that was great for them. And then I mean, just the surprise, we got to touch on this. The surprise of the day, the upset of the year potentially, with Miami over New England. I mean, Miami's played a lot better after looking kind of rough the first month, 2 months of the season. They've been playing better recently. They're playing hard. They finished the season, including this win, 5-4. Brian Flores, who isn't going to win Coach of the Year, obviously, because the team is 5-11. But I mean, he could easily be up there. I mean, there was a team that, for all intents and purposes, was trying to lose every game, and he got them to play hard every week, play opponents tough, and squeak out 5 wins. 2 of them over teams that are going to the playoffs. So I mean that's as impressive a coaching job as you can ask for this season. But yeah, I mean from the Patriots' perspective, I mean like I said, it's a division game. It's tough. Last game of the season, the Dolphins beat them last year, so it's not like they're incapable of doing this. But they didn't need a miracle this time. Just a nice composed drive from Ryan Fitzpatrick down there at the end. I mean the Dolphins, as crazy as it sounds, were in control of this game basically the entire time. I mean. They got out to an early lead, including a pick 6 against Tom Brady, who, I mean, that rarely ever happens to. But they were able to get the pick 6. They were able to control the game most of the first half. I mean, the Patriots were able to tie it up there a little late. But like I said, the Dolphins had controlled it. And even when they tied up, you're like, oh, okay, this is when the Patriots are going to take off in the second half. Nope, that's not what happened. They punted their first drive. Miami went down, scores a touchdown. I mean, they answered back with a touchdown, but at no point did it ever seem like the Patriots were comfortable, and you could tell. And then they get the touchdown late to put them up 24-20, the Patriots do, and then they just, as crazy as it sounds, the backbone of their team allows Fitzpatrick to drive 13 plays, 75 yards for a touchdown to Mike Gesicki to give him the lead with like 20 seconds left, and it's just a shocking outcome and a shocking turn of events, because that could very well, I mean, it did very well change the way the AFC playoff picture looks. And it's just a development where it's like, if you're the Patriots, that's not a game you can lose. And obviously it could be the loss that ends their season if certain things don't go right in this playoff push. But yeah, those were some of the big games this weekend, and we'll touch on like I've just been talking about. We'll touch on that playoff picture coming up and just how it all shaped out, who's playing where, who's playing when, and which teams maybe got a favorable draw and which teams didn't get as good of a draw as they may have liked right after this break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So as I was talking before the break, there were quite a few games that had playoff implications in this one, and finally we know how it's going to shape out. I mean, the one game I didn't get to touch on too much earlier in the last segment was the Tennessee-Texans game, but it was one of those things where I had wondered earlier this week if the Texans were going to try, and it was clear that they weren't. So that game ended up, the Titans were just able to dominate. I mean, Derrick Henry went for 200 yards, and I mean, he's a guy that, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but could he be an Offensive Player of the Year candidate? Could A.J. Brown be an Offensive Rookie of the Year candidate? I mean, the way that they've dominated the season and dominant for the Titans down the stretch, especially to get them into the playoffs, has been crucial. So, like I said, we'll talk about the award winners in a couple segments here, but yeah, that was another big game. And even that Lions Packers game, because it looked like for a while the Packers were just gonna concede, potentially getting the one seed. They didn't end up getting it, but concede potentially because I mean they just came out and were just came out flat. Which I mean, like I said, it's tough when it's a division game. You know that your opponent's going to try very hard, but I mean to be down 14-0 late in that second quarter. And to go into the half down 17-3. I mean, the comeback was great. They needed that. It was very important for them to get it. But it's just crazy to think about that what could have been had the Lions been able to pull it out. But as I said, the NFL playoff picture is finally set. We've been wondering how it's going to shape out for a couple weeks now, just in terms of there were a lot of games that were up. I mean, a lot of divisions and positions that were a little up in the air. We really didn't know how it's going to finalize, but your final NFL playoff picture is as follows. AFC side, you got the Ravens as the 1. The Chiefs slide up to the 2 because of that big Dolphins win. Funny enough, Andy Reid in his post-game press conference said hail to the Dolphins. Because I mean, yeah, that's a big win for everybody. Because I mean, now the Patriots, they have to play wild card weekend. I mean, they play the Titans, who aren't as clear are going to be a tough out. I mean, Derrick Henry, I believe, finished the league as the leading rusher this season, and I mean that's a team who's been playing hot, who again, much like the Eagles, getting hot at the right time, has been in playoff mode for a little bit while now, just in terms of needing to win as many games as possible here down the stretch, and Derrick Henry in the cold, especially if it's going to be cold up in New England. I mean, I don't know the weather forecast yet, but when we break it down later in the week, I will. And it's just one of those things where if it's going to be cold on that Saturday night, I mean, clearly I'm not built for NFL football, but I would, I would want no business of tackling Derrick Henry in the cold. I mean, why, like that, what about that sounds fun? Like, be honest with me, what about tackling Derrick Henry in the cold in Foxborough sounds like an enjoyable time, an enjoyable way to spend my Saturday night. So, I mean, obviously the Patriots are going to be ready, but that's definitely not going to be an easy matchup. So, and the Patriots got the 3, the Texans were locked into the 4, the Bills were locked into the 5, and the Titans were able to get the 6. I mean, it didn't really matter because the Steelers couldn't get the win over the Ravens' backups, unfortunately, and then yeah, the Raiders also lost to the Broncos. Yeah, the Ravens also lost to the Broncos. So the Raiders also lost to the Broncos. So even if the Titans had folded against the Texans' backups, they still would have got in. So that's the AFC side, and on the NFC side, like we touched on earlier, the San Francisco 49ers, they get the 1 seed, huge for them. And like I've already mentioned, it's that home field advantage for a team with as little playoff experience as them is going to be key. I mean, look back not even that long ago to to the Eagles when Nick Foles went on his run with them. I mean, they were a team that had Nick Foles, who played in a playoff game, had Malcolm Jenkins, Chris Long, who had won Super Bowls in previous places, but they were a team that came in, didn't really have a whole lot of playoff experience. We were playing a lot of the guys that, like I said, didn't have too much playoff experience. They were kind of new to this, and they were able to get that home playoff games, get that home field advantage, and they were able to ride that to a Super Bowl win. So you never know. I mean, like I said, just that fourth down stop, and also that not look at that pass interference. But more importantly, the fourth down stop, because like that pass interference is null and void if they don't get that stop. But that fourth down stop may turn out to be one of the, I mean, it's already one of the biggest plays of the year, but it could turn out to be even bigger if it ends up that San Francisco is able to get to the Super Bowl, just because they would have, if they don't get the stop there, then they got to go on the road and winning 3 road playoff games potentially, even for a team as good as San Francisco. I mean, that's a tough ask for anybody. So, like I said, them getting the 1 is huge. Green Bay getting the 2 and holding on for that win was also huge, just because they're in a situation where if somebody, if say like the Eagles or maybe even a Seattle team, if somebody's able to knock off the 49ers, then they could potentially get an NFC Championship game in Green Bay in what we can only presume would be very cold and rough conditions for teams that aren't equipped or aren't accustomed to playing in that kind of environment. So that's huge for them to get the 2 seed. So at least they get the bye. And then again, they're another team that, I mean, they have Aaron Rodgers, but their head coach is a first-year head coach. He's never played in a playoff game. They have some younger and inexperienced guys on both sides of the balls who've never really been in a game of this magnitude. So just being able to get that first game at the very least at home is cool. Just so you get that first, you get those jitters out of the way. You're in a nice environment to feel good and everything. And it's just you always want to play home and as many playoff games as you can at home. So get the bye for the Packers is huge. I mean, the Saints, who I mean are arguably just as good, if not better than the Packers, they're unfortunately stuck at the 3 seed, and you get the rematch of the Minneapolis Miracle, different quarterback in Kirk Cousins, but also different location in terms of this one's in New Orleans. But I know definitely a lot of those Saints players that were on that team 2 years ago are going to be thinking about that and trying to get that revenge. So that'll be a fun matchup. That'll be the 1:00 game on Sunday. And then you got like I said, the Eagles and Seahawks, the battle of the injured teams. I mean, from both sides of this, the Seahawks play a team that's just as injured as they are, and vice versa for the Eagles. I mean, either team is when you look at them from either side. I think, I mean, obviously the Seahawks wanted to win the division, get a home playoff game, so they're not happy about that. But in terms of the team they could have picked, if it's between playing them or playing the Saints or the Vikings, I think they would take the Eagles. And if from an Eagles side of this, if you're between playing San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan, the way he's able to call plays in that ferocious front, and Richard Sherman back there, you don't want to deal with that. Even though you've already lost the Seahawks this year, it's not going to be easy when, like I said, they got Russell Wilson, they got Pete Carroll. Maybe beast mode with a week under his belt will be a little bit better next weekend. But I mean, both those teams are happy they got who they got. So that, I mean, it'll be a fun slate of games next weekend. And I think this playoffs is just going to be great just because of the unpredictability. The season's been pretty unpredictable, and I don't expect the playoffs to be too much different. I mean, for all these matchups, either the teams could win, either the teams could lose. So I think we're going to get some surprising outcomes this weekend, and I don't think that'll stop until we get to the Super Bowl and even possibly in the Super Bowl. But yeah, it's going to be great. And going from the NFL playoffs, we had some college playoff games this weekend and some other New Year's Six Bowl games, both that happened this weekend, and that will be coming up early this week. And we will talk about those right after this.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So yeah, the NFL playoffs or in my opinion, they should be in there. I think they're going to be very good. And the college playoffs lived at least one of the games lived up to the hype of what we thought it could and would be. And that game was the late game, the Fiesta Bowl. Clemson, Ohio State. That's when you look at two teams that are evenly matched on paper. That's the kind of game you want to give them a slugfest, back and forth, a game that comes down to the very end. That's easily going to be one of the games of the year. Excuse me, in my personal opinion, just because of the stakes, the players that you had in the game, the players you had coming in, players you had coming in and out due to injury, fighting through injury. It felt like a playoff game, felt like a war. And at this stage, in this point in the season, that's really all you can ask for. So, that was great. The Ohio State, they started off great early. You thought, oh man, because that first game, which we would touch on in a couple minutes, that Oklahoma LSU game, that game was a rout, and you're just like, oh man, are we going to get two routes in the same weekend? That's not what you hope for, But unfortunately for Ohio State, they weren't able to capitalize on their early success on offense like LSU was, just because they got down to the red zone. They had no issue moving the ball in that Clemson defense, which was, not too surprising because they have a great offense. But the Clemson defense is very good. But they were only able to muster up 13 points in their first 4 drives, and even they scored the 1 touchdown, but on their two field goal drives, they kicked a field goal from the 4, and then they kicked a field goal again from the 5 of Clemson. So it's just like, if they are able to punch those in for touchdowns, or at least punch one more of those in for a touchdown, we're talking about a 21-0 lead potentially. That completely changed the dynamic of that game. Obviously, we saw that Clemson was able to come back from 16-0, but that 21-0, or even potentially 28-0, that's a completely different story. Completely different story. And you got to give Clemson credit. They're a team that, as I talked about earlier this week, they're a team that's battle tested. A team that had been through this, had been on the big stage before, come through. They had a coach that had experience, they had a quarterback that had experience, but they weren't experienced in this. This is the first time Trevor Lawrence as a college quarterback had ever trailed in a game, which is crazy when you think about it. Even not even like a 7-0, 3-0, nothing, but Clemson has just been so dominant the past 2 years that they get up early on people and then they just beat them down. So to see them have to come from behind and see them have to do it with guys like T. Higgins getting hurt early, having to come back in, Justin Ross coming in and out of the lineup. It was very impressive, though not mired in controversy, especially a little bit in terms of that targeting call. Well, the first of a couple calls that, if you're a Ohio State fan, I'm sorry that you have to go through that, but there were a couple calls that definitely did not go your way in this game. But the first one had to be that targeting call on Shaun Wade. It's a tough call because he hits him in the head with his helmet, but it's like Trevor Lawrence ducks down. He's not trying to hit him with the head. He doesn't leap off his feet, but it's just one of those things where even in college they're going to protect. I mean, in football, regardless of the level, they protect the quarterback. So if you hit the guy in the head, it's potentially get targeting. But I mean that changed the game. That helped continue a drive for Clemson, which they ended up scoring on. Yeah, that was their first touchdown drive. They ended up that was a 3rd and 5, would have been a sack, forced them to punt, but now they get a first down, and then they end up scoring. Travis Etienne ends up scoring a couple plays later, and then obviously Sean Wade's out the rest of the game. Obviously he's not their best corner because Jeff Okudah is, but I mean he's as good of though he plays mostly on the side, as good as a number 2 corner as you could have in the country. I mean, very few teams, maybe LSU has a 1-2 as good at that, but most teams don't. And as you could see, Clemson was struggling with them early, but that changed the game. And then that happens. They get the touchdown. The Clemson's defense holds up, and then obviously Trevor Lawrence takes off for that long touchdown run, 67 yards. I mean, he's a guy who clearly worked on his running. I mean, he's not a Deshaun Watson type. He's not that kind of runner, but he's a guy that is very clearly very capable, and they clearly have no issue running the ball with him. And that play was special, just in terms I personally did not think he had that kind of speed and agility to get out in the open field, make guys miss, and run for a touchdown as that long. So he shut me up in that regard. But yeah, that was great. So now we're going to the half, 16-14 in a game that could have been potentially 20. I mean, if Ohio State was a little bit better in the red zone, it could have had 21, 28 points or by halftime, and then this game goes completely differently. But so we come out in the second half, like I said, close game. They had a couple punts back and forth, and then they run into the kicker on a 4th down after Ohio State's defense gets off the field. They run into the kicker. I mean, they rough the kicker. Excuse me. They rough the kicker, and then that sets up another touchdown drive for Clemson. Travis Etienne on a touchdown catch, 50 yards. And then you're just like, oh man, for as much as Ohio State's dominated this game, now they're losing, and you're just like, oh, this is where Clemson starts to pull away. And I give Ohio State credit; they were able to fight back. And like I said, that's kind of all you can hope for in games like this. You want teams to be able to not. You don't want anybody to go. You don't want anybody to go and get blown out. So the fact that Ohio State, both these teams were able to fight back from deficits was quite impressive. But then also you had after a couple punts, including one that this is the other play. I just remember, this is the other play that was definitely mired in controversy. The one where Ohio State had what looked like a scoop and score for a touchdown that was overturned on review, which definitely was interesting in terms of that would have given Ohio State the lead, given them the momentum back. It was called a fumble and a touchdown on the field, and you see it in a replay, and you're like, I mean, you hear the guy, the referee, the expert they had explaining, and you're just like, really? That's what we're gonna go with? But I mean, he was right. So, that was another tough one because the guy takes 3 or 4 steps. I mean, he's not able to tuck the ball away or anything, turn up field, anything like that. But the only reason he didn't hold on to the ball was because Okudah comes in and strips it out. So that was like, if you're a Ohio State fan, you're not happy about either of those calls. But they were able, like I said, to fight through them. And they were able to come back, take the lead. Chris Olave catches a nice ball from Justin Fields on 4th and 1. I mean, that was just a great play call because it just looked like Clemson looked like they were prepared to stack the box for the run against J.K. Dobbins, another guy who was fighting through injury, got a head of ankles injury late in the first half, was able to fight through it, and the entire second half was great in that second half. It was great, I mean, basically the whole game, but look like they were ready for the run. They didn't get the run. Olave goes up, makes a nice catch over a defender. Well, past the defender because he ran past him on the little post. I don't know why the guy was playing outside leverage when he just gave up the whole middle of the field, but it ended up working out for Clemson, so who am I to judge? But yeah, so they come down, get the touchdown there. Looks like, okay, maybe Ohio State is going to be able to put a stranglehold on this. I mean, they get a punt, and then Ohio State gets the ball back, and then another controversial call. This is more so for the coach. I mean, them choosing not to go for it on 4th and 4 from the Clemson 39 with the lead. Maybe one of those plays that haunts the coach. And, I mean, it could be good for that team just in terms of helping them have motivation for next year. That's one that you're going to look back on outside of the targeting, outside of the overturned fumble return. Because that's the one where it's 4th and 4. You have a chance to almost ice the game. If not ice it, then at least give your team a chance to get a touchdown there, to go up by a large amount, and they just weren't able to. They decided to punt, do the conservative route, and then Clemson just goes down, drives down the field in 4 plays, and scores a touchdown. So it's just like, oh, okay, maybe we shouldn't have punted, and maybe they shouldn't have. But I mean, even with them going down the field 4 plays, 94 yards, touchdown in under a minute 20 seconds, it's an amazing drive from them. And a couple amazing plays from Amari Rodgers, and then obviously from ETN on the great play called the little Tebow play that they usually Florida used to run on the goal line that they ran from like the 30. It just like they set it up the whole game. It's been running Trevor Lawrence the entire game, and it set it up perfectly. And it was just like Ohio State just wasn't prepared for it. And then Travis Etienne does the rest. I mean, he's a special guy. He's going to be a great player on Sundays. And, I mean, sometimes just players make plays, and Etienne made a play on that one. But, yeah, Ohio State still had a chance. They drove down the field, had a shot there at the end, and then just unfortunately for Ohio State, had a miscommunication. Chris Olave, who caught the earlier touchdown to give them the lead, thought Fields was starting to scramble, broke off his route, and Fields was trying to lead him up the field, and maybe he hits him again for another touchdown on a post route. But the Clemson guy saw it, read it, picked it off, and then that was the game. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that's one of those games where you hate that somebody had to lose, because that game was just so entertaining. You would have, especially after the first game, you would have asked for how many quarters as we could get of that. But it was one of the things one team had to lose in Clemson. They just showed that championship pedigree, just in terms of like they were down. It looked like they were going to get blown over, but they fight and they continue to fight, and that's just that's what you want out of a champion, and that's what they showed. But but then outside of that game, you had the earlier game, the LSU-Oklahoma game, and that one looked close in the first quarter, and then that was about it. Because, Joe Burrow and LSU and Justin Jefferson just put on a show. They put on a show that we haven't seen before in terms of all the records they broke, and could very well never see again. Joe Burrow goes out, those 7 touchdown passes, 400 yards in the first half. Jefferson catches 4 touchdown passes. They have the Blitnikoff winner in Jamar Chase, and he was basically a non-factor. And they scored 60 points. That's just how good. That just shows how good LSU's offense has been all year in terms of they had that, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire didn't really do all that much in this game, and they still put up 63 because your best players play. In games like this, they say big time players make big time plays in big time games, and Joe Burrow clearly showed why he won the Heisman, just because he was doing whatever he wanted. He was scrambling, buying time, throwing the ball accurately down the field, giving his playmakers a chance to make plays, and when there were plays to be made, they made them. And that's all you could want. Like I said, Joe Burrow, the 8 total touchdowns. He tied a record for most passing touchdowns in a bowl game with 7, but then the 8 total is the most ever in a bowl game. Justin Jefferson set a Peach Bowl record for yards and receptions. He had 14 for 227, which that's an absurd stat line on the field. That had many other receivers. Even on the other side, CeeDee Lamb, who had a great play to set up the Oklahoma's first touchdown, but unfortunately, he doesn't play defense, so his efforts kind of didn't really matter too much. But yeah, and then also going back to Jefferson, he set a New Year's 6 in college football player record for touchdown receptions, and it was just one of those things where it was over. It felt like we had a chance for a good game, and then it was over by like the second quarter. You're just like, oh, okay. LSU's just going to score every time they get the ball. All right. That works. If you can do it, you might as well. And then even Joe Burrow was talking after the game about how they could have been better. It's hard to get better when you score 63 points in the college football semifinal playoff game. But, hey, we'll see. We'll see what they can do in a couple weeks now in the championship game against Clemson. Defense is a little bit better, but, if Joe Burrow is playing that well, I don't know who's going to stop them. But we'll talk about the game a little bit more down the line. But, I mean, those are only two of the New Year's Six bowl games that have happened so far. We had another one on Saturday, another one coming up you guys listen to this on Monday, so coming up later today. And we will talk about both of those right after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here once again on the GSMC Sports Podcast. So as I mentioned at the full break, the Beach Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, college football semifinal games happened on Saturday. Both different, both very impressive games in their own right, but those weren't the only New Year's Six bowl games that went down that day. We also had the Cotton Bowl, Penn State, Memphis, and I mean, if you're a fan of offense, it was the game for you. I mean, you just had teams going up and down the field. You had players getting yards all over the place, whether it's through the air or on the ground, didn't really matter. I mean that game started out and it was like, all right. Memphis drove down the field, got a field goal, which unfortunately for them would be a story of their night, just their ability to not able to score touchdowns. But they go down the field, score, and get a field goal. And Penn State comes back, 3 plays, touchdown, Journey Brown, great run for 32 yards. Then Memphis comes right back down, scores again, it's 10-7. And that's kind of just the way the game went for most of that half. It just was back and forth a little bit until Penn State was able to get some stops in the middle of the second quarter. With the help of Michael Parsons, who was all over the place. The defensive MVP of that game had 14 tackles, 2 sacks. I think one of the commentators made a point. It seemed like there was 10 of them out on the field, and it really looked like he was all over. And I mean, you saw why. He was a guy that was an All-American this year and is going to be in the conversation for coming into next year one of the, if not the best defensive player in the country. But he was everywhere. I mean, it was just a lot of that ground attack for Penn State. They were just able to do whatever they wanted on the ground. I mean, they finished with almost 400 yards, I believe. He had 396 on the ground. Absurd. I mean, they didn't even really need to pass the ball that much. Sean Clifford, the quarterback, only had 133 yards. But I mean, when a guy in Journey Brown runs for 200 yards, another guy, Noah Cain, who hadn't played in a couple weeks. Oh, yeah, he was out for most of the end of that season for them. Had 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their quote-unquote third running back has 50 yards. It's one of those things where they were just a very balanced rushing attack. Not overall offense, but a very balanced rushing attack. I mean, if it's just a thing where a defense can't stop you in one way, I mean, why go away from it? So as I was saying, Memphis took the 10-7 lead, took a 13-7 lead where they drove down again, got to the Penn State 17, couldn't do anything with that to kick a field goal. Then Penn State comes back, scores a touchdown, Noah Cain. Then they get a punt. They come down, score again. Get another punt, come down, score again. Penn State does. I mean, Memphis got their one of their touchdowns to get to 28-20, and then Penn State goes down, gets a 10-play drive, scores again right before the half, give them a 35-20 lead. I mean, Memphis was able to get a long field goal to send them into the half, but But, I mean, like I said, they're still down 12. It's going to be tough. But, I mean, they came out swinging, came out in the second half, drove down the field, scored. All right, so you're like, all right, we got a ball game. Clifford throws a touchdown. Clifford throws an interception on the next drive. They get the ball at the Penn State 29. Can't do anything with it again. Kick a field goal. I mean, they settle for I don't want to say settle, but they kicked 6 field goals in the game. So in the game, they lost by 14. If you turn 3 of those field goals into touchdowns, that's 12 points. And yeah, it's 12 extra points they would have had. I believe that. Yeah, I think that math counts out. You guys can check that for me. But yeah, I think that math adds up. So it's a tighter game there at the end, and maybe they could get something with it. But the play of the game in a game that had a lot of offense was actually defensive play. And again, it was Micah Parsons. He comes in, was able to get some pressure, pop the ball up in the air. Garrett Taylor catches it, returns it for a touchdown, and then that was about it from there. The Memphis never got closer than 6. I mean, they went down the field, kicked another field goal, but then Penn State had a touchdown, they got another interception, and that was basically the game. So, I mean, that Cotton Bowl was definitely an entertaining game. If you're a Memphis fan, it was unfortunate just because your offense just kept driving and stalling. And if you're a Penn State fan, you're just happy to see that your offense, or your running attack, was as good as it was, especially since all those guys could be back next year, depending on transfers and other things. They all could be back. And then also you have a defensive player in Micah Parsons who could turn out to be the best in the country. So, I mean, there's not really much to be mad at. Not too much to be mad about, other than obviously you don't want to ever give up 39 points in a game. But when you score 53, it doesn't really matter. But yes, that was the Cotton Bowl. And then we got on Monday, we got the Orange Bowl, Florida, Virginia. That's definitely an interesting one just because of the fact that this will be UVA's first ever New Year's Six Bowl game. So they're having a very successful season from their standards. And also it's just interesting to see that what the Florida does at quarterback, because they've had, after Felipe Franks went down, they had Trask, who took over and who's a different kind of player than they usually had in terms of he's a guy that can run, but he's much more of a pocket kind of guy, pocket passer. I mean, he helped get the Florida offense to average over 300 yards passing for the first time since 2001. So that's a very impressive feat in its own right. He's been good. He's been good for them all year when he's been out there. I mean, he's been a little banged up too. So that's why it gets interesting, because you have a guy in Emory Jones who's a different kind of quarterback, in that he's much more of a threat as a runner. And then it's just interesting to see, because I mean, it's a bowl game, so it's not a situation where obviously you want to win, but it's not for a championship, so you might want to try new things, test out some things for next year. And it's be interesting to see how they play both of those guys together, if they decide that they're going to go full Trask and just air it out, or if they're going to try to sprinkle in Emory Jones a little bit and see what kind of dynamic he can bring to that game. But yeah, it's just one situation where I think Florida's probably just going to be too much for Virginia, though. I mean, I give Virginia credit; they've been playing great this year, but unfortunately, they're coming off of obviously that blowout, lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game, and I mean, Florida's been very good down the stretch of their season. Though they will be without arguably the best defensive player and cornerback, C.J. Anderson, who decided to sit this one out for draft reasons, which I talked about on an earlier podcast. I completely understand if you're a guy who's potentially could go in the first or second round and you're playing in a bowl game that's not the college football playoff. I mean, if you set out a playoff game or championship, that's a different story. But if you're sitting out just like a regular bowl game, I understand it's an Orange Bowl, New Year's Six, you want to obviously win that game. But, I mean, you also don't want to have a Jaylen Brown, Jake Butt situation where you get hurt, and now your draft position is worsened because, I mean, especially in that first contract, you want to get as much money as you can because no one's guaranteed a second contract. So at least get that first round contract, get that first round money, and I understand it. And I mean, Florida should be all right without them. They've been playing well through the last part of the season. I mean, after their defeat to LSU, which they only lost by 14, so compared to Oklahoma, that's not too bad. I mean, they've won 4 out of 5 to end the season, including their one loss was by 1 score to Georgia, who's one of the best teams in the country. So it's nothing to get mad about. But yeah, they've been dominant the last 3 games. They've beat Vanderbilt 56-0, beat Mizzou 23-6, and then beat Florida State, who's now obviously down here, but they beat them 40-17. So they've been playing well. Like I said, Virginia's coming off of that route in the ACC championship game, and they're a team that's much like Clemson, Florida is, and where they're going to have speed, athletes everywhere, all over the field, and that just might be too much for Virginia to handle. I mean, I guess we'll find out. Well, like I said, we'll find out on Monday, so we'll find out later today when you guys hear this. Or it may even be before you hear this, depending on what time you guys decide to listen to this podcast. But it'll be interesting to see. I'm definitely going to be tuned in. But I think this is a game that Florida probably gets the job done. Though, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what not having C.J. Anderson out there does for that defense. But, I mean, Perkins is going to give it his best shot. He's a great dual threat quarterback. He plays like a running back sometimes, just the way he's able to run the ball out there. But I said that the Florida defense, those Florida playmakers on the side of the ball, those athletes are different than what Virginia's used to seeing, especially in the ACC. Though, I mean, Clemson is probably the closest thing in terms of athletes, and obviously we saw how that went. So I don't think it'll be that bad, but I do think Florida will probably get the job done. But regardless, it should be interesting. So I will be tuned in. I hope you guys will as well. But getting off of that, in terms of we have another college sport in terms of college basketball with a player sitting out. And I'm going to talk about how that player is sitting out, what that could mean for the future of the NCAA and future of college players all over, and what they decide to do in terms of whether or not college basketball is worth it for them, especially if you're a high prospect. So we will talk about that right after this.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We are back from GSMC Sports. In case you guys are wondering, the player I was talking about is James Wiseman. He picked up a number 1 prospect, a potential number 1 pick in the draft. He was a guy who Penny Hardaway was able to recruit to Memphis, was going to be a part of their recruiting class, help energize college basketball in terms of getting guys and getting a recruiting class together at a school that wasn't really known as a blue blood powerhouse in terms of college basketball. But he was suspended earlier this year for improper payment in terms of Penny Hardaway helped his family move to Memphis before he took this job. So it's unfortunate that they ruled that, but I guess they considered him a booster because he gave money to Memphis back in the day. So he was suspended. If he was talked about, he thought he was going to come back. Decided he was going to leave, even though he served some of his suspension. So it was kind of the timing of it was a little bit weird. But then officially this weekend he signed with the agency, so like his eligibility is now done. And I'm just interested to see how his decision could impact future college athletes in terms of, I think more and more college players are realizing that they don't need the NCAA as much as the NCAA needs them. And I say that not to see that like the college basketball can't survive. Obviously, March Madness. I mean, that's their biggest thing. So if you don't have marquee players playing in their January or February regular season games on ESPN, that's not that big of a deal because their March Madness is where they always make their money. So that's not going to hurt the NCAA that much. But in terms of like star power. Because, I mean, right now, who's the biggest name in college basketball? It's hard to say. I mean, Anthony Edwards, a guy who could be a top pick in the draft at Georgia, is on a bad team. Cole Anthony's hurt. Another guy, Denny, he's playing overseas. And then you have guys like LaMelo Ball and RJ Hampton who are playing professionally in Australia. So it's just like, who's that guy? Because, I mean, last year at least they had Zion, but Zion was just a factor of the NCAA. He chose not to go a different route because he was big before he got there. He's probably a case study in terms of one of the more recent social media stars or players that were turned into a star via social media that the NCAA happened to capitalize on. And that, like, he was a guy who was pretty unheralded coming out of South Carolina, I believe, before his junior year, and then he just blew up on Twitter and Instagram and with all those viral dunks that he had. And then next thing you know, he's the biggest name, biggest star in the quote unquote amateur basketball world. And it's just one of those things where, like, he was another guy who probably could have decided to take a route where he didn't need to go to the NCAA because his name was big enough. I mean, obviously people wanted to see how he could do against college athletes because some of those highlights were against what some would consider inferior competition. I mean, you can only play who's around you. I mean, it's not his fault that he went to or that he lived in South Carolina and maybe the guys weren't athletic as him, though. I mean, he's an athletic freak, so very few players in the world are as athletic as him. But he was a guy that he didn't need to go to Duke to be a star. He could have sat out. He could have. I mean, I don't know if he could have done a Darius Bazey where he interns at New Balance for a year, but his name and his star power is big enough to where he didn't need the NCAA to go number one. And I think that's what some of these players are starting to realize, just because, I mean, it'll change a little bit in a couple years potentially when you can start making money off your likeness. But in terms of if you're a number one recruit, like, playing college basketball, does it really affect you? I mean, you've seen guys like Ben Simmons or Markelle Fultz in recent years that have gone number one and played on teams that haven't made the NCAA tournament. So it's like, do you need to be at that level in terms of, do you need to just play a year in college just for fun, more or less for some of these bigger guys that don't go to the marquee schools and risk getting yourself hurt, almost like Zion did, because people were afraid of when a shoe burst with that knee injury, if that was going to affect him long term. And I mean, technically he didn't, but he's also sitting out this year, so maybe that could be some residual side effects of that. But residual effects of that, excuse me. But it's one of those things where it's like, this could potentially be a bad omen for college basketball if more and more players start to realize, like, I don't know if I really need to do this. And like I said, the NCAA's been around for forever. It's gonna hold strong, but in terms of that, like, star power, when you think about it, it's like, who's there, who's out there, and that could be a problem. You can't just have people only care about your sport come March, and that could potentially be where the NCAA is going if some of these star players decide, all right, I'm going to go overseas and make money, or they're trying to unionize the G League. I believe we'll see how Adam Silver does with that. But if there's a avenue for high school players to get to the G League right out of school, and then now you're losing out on those guys that could be helping propel the brand and helping propel college basketball to new heights because they want to go to Australia, they want to go to Spain or other places in Europe or potentially the G League in the future to go make money because they know that, hey, I don't need to be the NCAA. I don't need to be on a college team to keep my name buzzing or to be a star. I can use my social media. I can use Instagram, Twitter. And like I said, Zion was a star before he even got to Duke. He didn't need to go to Duke. He could have went anywhere. And honestly, he almost went to Clemson. So, I mean, he would have been he probably still would have gone number one or at least top 3, top 5 if he went to Clemson. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, when you're at that level of stardom, you don't really need to go to a big marquee school. And I think that's kind of where potentially the NCAA could be struggling, because when you look at the top teams in this year, I mean, there's been so many upsets this year, and there's no really one dominant team. So it's like, all right, what is incentivizing the casual fan or the average fan to tune in pre-March Madness? Like, at least last year you had the Dukes, you had Duke with Zion, R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish. I mean, John Morant wasn't on TV as much, but you had Bol Bol in the beginning of the year before he got hurt at Oregon. You had guys that people were tuning in to want to see. And if it's like if some of those players are, whether they're withdrawing or deciding not to go or deciding to go overseas, or they're just shutting themselves down with injuries, that all right, maybe they could play through or be on a shorter time span, shorter recovery time if they wanted to. But it's just like, is it really worth it? I mean, you're at this point, if you're playing something for free, trying to get to a point where you can make some money off of it, you got to get to the point where you can make the money first. Because if you get hurt or have a serious injury before you even get to the NBA, then what was the point? It's the same. It's a similar concept in college football, obviously. Why people sell out those bowl games, just because it's like, all right, I've been playing this game for no money for so long. I finally have a chance to make some money. So why am I risking this injury? And I think that's what a lot of players are doing, that's what the stars are doing, because they realize all right, I could play for this team. And it's just one of those things where it's like they're used to playing in these AAU circuits with maybe some guys that they've been around, but you're playing with you're going to these fancy camps and tournaments, you're playing with guys that maybe you don't know as well, and you don't really build that bond that a lot of college sports are kind of built on, that brotherhood, that camaraderie of going to school together and having class together and hanging out together all the time. Like, these guys are just coming in, they don't really know each other. They may not know each other that well, and they're just like, they have no loyalty. Like, James Wiseman doesn't really know any of those guys he was recruited to play with. He has no sense of loyalty or bond to be like, oh, you know what, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to stick out this suspension. I'm going to play for these guys, all that fun stuff. It's like, if from his perspective, it's like, I'm a guy that has a chance to go number one in the draft. Like, why am I don't want to say wasting his time, because, I mean, you want to show people that you can play. He's only played, 3 games this year, so you need to put more film out there. You need to show guys what you can do, what you can't do, what you need to improve on heading into the pre-draft season. But it's like, just that sense of camaraderie or brotherhood, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better term. He doesn't have that with those guys, so there's no reason to be like, all right, I'm going to fight through this for them. I mean, even though Memphis was clearly willing to go to bat for him, but I think a lot of that stemmed from he was going to be a big draw for the school. You could get more eyes on them, get more people talking about them, so I could see why they were wanting him to get back out there as much as he could. But from his perspective, he's like, I don't really need Memphis. And it's unfortunate for Memphis, just because, like I said, they were going to have they had a very good recruiting class. This could have helped for them to build and to build more in the future. But it's like, if you have more guys that think like James Wiseman, where it's like, I'm a top guy, I don't need college basketball, that's going to hurt the product, that's going to hurt the brand. And again, like I said, they're not going to lose that much money. But it'd be interesting to see how many more people think like Wiseman and be like, I'm going to go a different route, or do like the RJ Hamptons or the Mellos, where they're big time names and they don't need the NCAA, because you have social media. You can see where they're playing, whenever they're playing, what they're doing. You can see their highlights, see their lowlights, all that stuff. Like, you don't need to be at a university or a college or 4-year college to get your stuff out there, or to get people to see you. So, and then also, if you do it overseas, you make money. So it's like, I can see the benefit from that. So I'd be interested to see if that changes once you can start making money off your likeness, and how that exactly all that's going to work. But until then, I think James Wiseman won't be the last big time recruit to maybe back out of a year, or sit out a year, or maybe even there may be some more guys like the Mellos, who. Well, I mean, I guess he was kind of forced to because the stupid NCAA rules, and they said he played professionally. He couldn't come back and play college, which is dumb, but whatever. NCAA has a lot of dumb rules, in my opinion. But you're going to see guys like that play overseas, make money for a year, and it's just like, all right, then I'll go to the league. I mean, there are leagues that are just as good, if not better, than college basketball. And I mean, you see guys like Luka, who's been playing professionally since he was a young teenager, that is, 14, 15 years old, and he comes to the league and lights it up. So it's like, it just showed, like, you don't need to go to NCAA to hone your skills and to get better and be prepared for college. I mean, be prepared for the pros, excuse me. So yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see if there's any more cases like James Wiseman and other players in the future, whether it's like they go to a school and they just decide after everything's may not work out, all right, I'll back out if they're a top prospect, or they decide to go overseas and make money, or even go to G League soon if that's a possibility. But yeah, I just think NCAA has to look into ways in which they can incentivize and keep those top prospects going to college. Because once that kind of breaks out, I mean, like I said, there's still enough guys going to 4-year colleges and enough guys coming in every year where it's not going to be an issue. I mean, everybody loves playing basketball, so you're not going to run out of basketball players. But unfortunately, you're going to run out of those marquee guys that get people to tune into a January regular season game. Because right now they just don't have that. None of those. They have no guys to really promote. They have no guys to talk about. And it's just a thing where very few people are thinking about or talking about college basketball. The only thing they're talking about is in a negative way in terms of this Wiseman thing. So that's not what the NCAA wants. That's what no one as a fan of college sports and college basketball wants. So that's something the NCAA is going to have to figure out. But lastly, after we come up on this last break, I'm going to turn over to some good news, and we're going to talk about some of the guys I think, now that we've said, like I said, the NFL season is wrapped up. Week 17 is done. All the games were finished. And I'm going to talk to you guys about who I think, even though the award shows are in a couple weeks now, we got some time to discuss this again later. But this is my initial post-Week 17 reaction to who I think is going to win all the awards. And you guys can hear those right after the break. You can agree, you can disagree, but I'm going to talk about it right after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
We are back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast. So as I said before the break, I'm going to bring you guys through who I think, if I were a voter, which I'm obviously not, but if I were, who I would give the NFL awards to. So we're going to start at MVP. That's an easy one. It's obviously Lamar. He's been, I don't want to say he's been I'll say it. He's been the best, most electrifying, most important player. He's obviously on the one seed in the AFC. That's usually at least somewhat of a prerequisite to be on a good playoff caliber team, and to be already on the best playoff caliber team. And he's definitely been that. He's been as good as a player. He's the central point of that Ravens offense. They run a offense that is unique to him and unique to the NFL in terms of that no one else. I don't even think the closest one could maybe be Deshaun in terms of what the kind of stuff they run, but he's even not as electrifying as a runner as Lamar is. So I'm not sure what the Ravens would be without him playing at this level. So it's just one of those things where I don't see how anyone. It's tough to make a case for anybody else but Lamar, in my personal opinion. But that's MVP. That's really the only one where I think it's pretty much a lock. Every other one, in my personal opinion, there's at least some discussion. So the next one we go to is Offensive Player of the Year, and this one's a little bit tricky for me just because you have a guy like Christian McCaffrey you obviously have to take that back. You have Lamar, who could win it, who very well could. I'm going to try to diversify, so I don't want to give Lamar everything, though. I mean, he deserves it, but we have a guy like Christian McCaffrey who has 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving. I mean, the team didn't have the season they wanted, but it was no fault of him. He was the one focal point of the Panthers offense that everyone tried to stop, and no one really had a good answer for him all year. But that's not who I'm going to go with. I'm going to go a little bit on a limb here, and I'm going to say Michael Thomas. Now, I don't think he's going to win just because receivers receivers don't normally win these kind of awards just unless they have like absolutely gaudy numbers, and those numbers are quite gaudy. The touchdowns aren't really there, but in terms of if you look at the non-quarterback division, the best player in the league, offense, defense, you could argue was Michael Thomas. I mean, he has the NFL receptions record and broke that. Has 149 catches for 1,700 yards. Only 9 touchdowns, which is why I think it could hurt him a little bit, just because the touchdowns aren't as high. You'd hope to at least get into double digits, but when you're on a team like the Saints and you're the only really offensive pass-catching threat that's been there, I mean, you have Alvin Kamara out of the back. For those who haven't had a little bit down year, you had Jared Cook, who's been out of the lineup this year. But in terms of receivers, there's no one else on that Saints offense that scares you, that you really are worried about trying to stop, and yet Michael Thomas still put up these numbers. And I mean, that's including games with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, who again is a very good backup. So it's not like it was some scrub out there throwing to him, but when you look at the consistency, I mean, week in and week out, he's getting 10 catches and 100 yards. It seems like every week. I mean, basically it was every week. I mean, yeah, I think his lowest catch output for the season, well, not including today because he only had 4 today, I believe. Yeah, he only had 4 catches today, but his lowest other output was 5 against the Seattle, and that was the first game with Teddy Bridgewater the starter, so not so shaky. And I mean, he only had 1, not including today again, because he only had 49. He only had 37 yards today, excuse me. But he had, so including today, he had 1, 2, 3, 4 games under 100. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. No, take that back. Excuse me. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games under 100 yards. But 2 of those games he had 89. One of the games he had 95. So, I mean, the lowest output of the season was 37, and before that it was 48. So, I mean, he's just been a guy that's been consistent. 100 yards, 9, 10 catches every week, it seems like. And again, like I said, he's been their best player on offense throughout the entire season. I mean, you could have given it to Drew Brees, but he only played it and he missed some games, so it's not that. But he's kept that offense afloat, and without him, I don't know where they'd be. So I gotta give him the nod. Defensive player of the year is another one that's tricky. I mean, you got guys like Trey White, who's had a great year. You got guys like T.J. Watt, who's had a great year. You have a guy like Chandler Jones, who unfortunately has a great year. I say unfortunately because he's on a team in Arizona that no one really thinks too much about. But, I mean, he's 19 sacks. You got Shaq Barrett, who's been great down in Tampa. But I decided that I'm going to give it to Stephon Gilmore, who's been an absolute shutdown, lockdown corner all year. Got 6 picks on the season. I mean, when you think of a guy who just locks down one side of the field, I mean, that's basically what he is. Either he allows you to... I mean, the good thing in the way the Patriots seem to run their defense is that he allows you to lock down the number 2 receiver. So you put him on number 2 receiver, or sometimes number 1. I mean, he was a part of the reason why Amari Cooper for the Cowboys had those 0 catches. He's shut out a lot of people, but if you don't want to do that, you can double the number 1 and just the number 2 receiver is basically erased for the entire game. So, I mean, that capability is something that not very many corners in this league have, and he's one of, if not the best one. And I just think he's on potentially, or I mean, statistically the best defense, but it depends on how people feel because you got the Bills defense up there as well. So it just depends on how you feel, and obviously the competition. The Bills is playing the AFC East too, so let me not say that. But obviously people always question the competition the Patriots have faced, but I just think he's the guy that I think is going to end up because, like I said, if Chandler Jones was able to get over that 20-sack threshold, then I think he had a strong case even with as bad as the Cardinals have been this year. I just think it's not, again, clearly it's not his fault, rookie head coach, rookie quarterback. Most teams don't have success like that, but I think that'll get into Stephon Gilmore. Offensive rookie of the year is another tough one because you have guys like Josh Jacobs, who started out hot and was great for most of the season, but obviously missed games towards the end. You have guys like Terry McLaurin, who have been great all year. You have Kyler Murray, who's put up good numbers for a rookie, both passing and rushing. Daniel Jones from the Giants, who, though much maligned coming out, has been great for the Giants. I mean, obviously they don't have the wins, and he missed a couple games, but I mean he's put up very good numbers. But I personally am going to go with A.J. Brown, who is a guy that basically has carried with the help of Tannehill and also Derrick Henry, has helped carry the Titans to the playoffs. I mean, he's a guy who started off a little slow, and I mean, maybe that's a part of that stems from being with Mariota, who was a little shaky to begin the year, but from week 12 on, which in week 12 he had four for 135 and a touchdown. Next week he had 3 for 45, but then the week after that he has 5 for 153 and 2 touchdowns, 8 for 114 and a touchdown. Didn't do too much against the Saints, but I mean the Saints have Lattimore, so they have a guy capable of shutting number one receiver down. And then even today, in a game where obviously the Texans weren't playing all their guys, but he still was able to put up 4 for 124 and a touchdown. And I just think that late season surge in terms and accompanied with Josh Jacobs just missing the last couple of games. I think that might be enough to give him certain. Like I said, I give it's a team sport, but I give some credence to winning, and he's been their number one receiver for the last 5-6 weeks of the season as a rookie. Put up over 1,000 yards, has over 7 touchdowns. So that's my pick, just because I mean I thought Miles Sanders from the Eagles had a shot at it if he had a really good game, and obviously he finished the season with the most scrimmage yards as a rookie, but he just didn't. Obviously, he got hurt today, so it was just tough for me to give him. But if he had a good game, as another guy, much like A.J. Brown, who's been the backbone of their offense for a team that made a late season playoff push, I mean, I give some credit to that. No offense to Josh Jacobs, who's been great, or to Kyler or Daniel Jones, but I got to give those guys a little bit of love. So I'm going to go A.J. Brown, defensive rookie of the year, excuse me. I mean, even that was a little bit interesting because you got Josh Allen down there and Jacksonville, who's had a great season. You got Devin Bush, who's been a starting middle linebacker on a great defense this year. Obviously, it's not his fault that the quarterback situation was a little dicey, but I think that they probably will, and they probably should end up giving it to Nick Bosa for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, it's hard to say the best defensive lineman, but he's been one of the best defensive linemen on a defense that helped lead a team to number one seed in the NFC. So it's hard for me to go against him. Like I said, Josh Allen has a very good case. Devin Bush has a very good case, but I just think Nick Bosa coming in as a rookie on a team that started out the season maybe not with people in people's eyes thought it could be a 1 seed, but he's been great all year. So it's just hard for me to go against that. So that's that. And then stemming from that, Coach of the Year, I'm going to give it to Shanahan, though I think guys like Sean McDermott and especially Mike Tomlin and Doug Peterson, in terms of with Tomlin piece and the injuries that they've got to deal with, the situations they've been in, cards they've been dealt, and they've just been able to fight through that and just keep their teams afloat. And obviously Doug was able to get into the playoffs, even losing 2 or 3 more guys today on a team that was already had like a bunch of their starters on IR or out for this game. So just the job both of those guys have done. But Shanahan, I just want to give him the nod just because of coming to season. No one thought the 49ers were going to be too much. I mean, they thought they could maybe win the NFC West, depending on how you felt about the Rams and if they were going to regress. But no one could have foreseen 13-3, number 1 seed in the NFC. One of the better offenses in the top 5 offense in the league in terms of creativity, play calling, diversity, the way they're able to get everyone involved at any time they cycle through running backs. It hasn't mattered. They get production out of everybody. And then, like I said, it's one. I mean, when you go 13-3, it's hard for me to knock you. In my opinion, it's hard for me to be mad at someone for going 13-3 and winning Coach of the Year. But even though, like I said, guys like Tomlin and Sean McDermott and Doug definitely deserve credit, and even Brian Flores, who we talked about a little bit earlier. I mean, obviously they're not going to give it to a guy who goes 5-11, But, I mean, the job he's done with that team in terms of getting them to play hard and tough and fight every single week on a team that many people thought could very well go 0-16 is a testament to him and his coaching job and the coaching job of that staff. So I want to give Brian Flores definitely some love on this podcast just because of the job he's done as a first-year head coach. Again, beat Belichick last game of the season, who most of Belichick's disciples don't have that accomplishment on their resume, and he's won and he did in his first year. So that's definitely impressive. So I want to give him some love too, but obviously they're not going to give it to the coach of a team that has a record that bad. So I think Shanahan's going to get it, and he's deserving of it. But I just want to shout out some guys who have struggled through. I mean, I guess I want to give Fournette credit too, because they struggled through some injuries. They've had their running back cycled through in and out. George Kittle missed some games. Their linemen have missed some games. Offensive and defensive. Sherman missed a game or two. So they've had their injuries too, just obviously not at the level of the Steelers or the Eagles. But regardless, when you take a team that no one really thought was going to do much and give them the number one seed and home field advantage in the NFC playoffs, I can't really knock you. So that's my guy. And then also, I guess it's Fournette probably going to clean up in this one. I think comeback player of the year is probably going to be Jimmy G. In terms of he tore his ACL. Yeah, no one really knew what he was going to be like coming to the season. And, I mean, he's led the team to the number one seed. I mean, obviously, it's a team sport, so I don't want to give him all the credit, but he's been very good this year. So I can't. He's been very good, like I said, led his team to the number one seed. So it's going to be hard for me to argue against that. So, yeah, that's just my personal opinion. I mean, been one of the better quarterbacks in the league, so I have no gripes with them giving it to him. Or, like I said, I think they probably will give it to him, and he's deservedly so. I don't want to make it sound like he doesn't deserve it, but because he definitely does. But yes, I think that an executive of the year is going to have to be, not going to have to be. I think it's going to be John Lynch in terms of what he's done, building that team up, hitting on a guy like Nick Bosa, bringing guys like Richard Sherman to help solidify that defense, trading for Emmanuel Sanders, probably the trade of the year, in terms of what the kind of impact he's had on that team since he's been brought in, how he changed that offense, how he changed that team, and also he's given them some veteran leadership. So when they go into the playoffs now, they have a guy, at least on that side of the ball, who's been there, done that, knows what to expect, can help the other guys know what to expect. And yeah, I mean, it's another guy who many people question, would he be able to make the transition? And it took some more time than people thought, but this team he's put together this year, they're one of the best, in some people's eyes, maybe the best team in the league. I'll still go Baltimore, but one of the best teams in the league. So I think the 49ers are probably going to clean up a little bit on award night, but that's just my personal opinion. You can agree. You may disagree. We can talk about that on another episode. As we are done here, I want to thank you guys for listening to another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. Before I get out of here, I want to again remind you guys to subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always up to date and get all the latest stuff from us. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, like us on Facebook. Wherever you are, we are, so just come find us. We can interact that way too if you want. If you could please give us a 5-star rating and review it. Like I said, it's very helpful, very informative, helps us get better, helps us try to continue to give you guys great stuff week after week. So we would really appreciate if you do that for us. And I will see you guys next time. Peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.